Microsoft had a couple problems with the Xbox launch, and PlayStation, they've got a few too. Last week, when I got my Xbox Series X, I did a video of the first 24 hours, the first impressions, and all that good stuff. One thing I pointed out in that video is that the launch, while it has gone well, it was not perfect. Microsoft was dealing with some issues, as every hardware manufacturer does when they ship the first initial allotment. For Microsoft, there were two main problems. One, which was fake, which was people blowing like vape smoke into their consoles for reasons I don't quite understand, I guess maybe for the retweets. The other one, which was actually legitimate and is impacting some consoles and only the Series X, because the Series S does not have a disk drive, is that it makes a clicking noise. When you put that disk into the drive and it spins up, it sounds like it's rattling around or banging against the side, which is honestly probably what it's doing, and those users cannot realistically use that drive without fear of damaging the disk, which means that they need a new console to be replaced. There are other issues out there too, especially it seems to be related to the disk drive. Now keep in mind, again, this is a very small percentage of people who actually have consoles, but you'll see videos like this, if you listen. Microsoft is dealing with this issue, and it's only fair to point out that, hey, Sony is having some issues as well, and it seems like Sony's issues might be a little bit more amplified than what Microsoft is dealing with right now. And fair warning, I'm going to show some videos here in a little bit, and if you're very sensitive to like flashing on the screen, you might want to turn away, because GPU artifacts are a pretty big deal, and they do have significant challenges with making it able to play the game. So the first issue was the download bug, which means that if you went to go download a game, it got put into the queue. Sometimes it just wouldn't download, and the only way to get it to actually like resolve itself was to do a factory reset, which is a pretty bad thing to have to do for a brand new console. That being said, it does look like Sony has resolved the issue, and there are workarounds. So if you are still experiencing that, hopefully you've already Googled it by now and are getting around that. So that one was a software thing, not too big of a deal, but I will say the GPU bug, which we're going to look at here in a little bit closer, I personally think is a much bigger deal, because this is completely hardware related, and the thing we don't know about this yet is how widespread it is. So all of these videos come from, I believe, Twitter that I've scraped. If you go look for the Twitter hashtag PS5 GPU, you will find these videos, and they come from people like Fiona, Young Cameron, and many others. So they're not buried. They're pretty easy to find. So here's the first one, and you can see some major artifacting here. And again, like I said, if you're sensitive to flashing on the screen, you might want to turn away for a while. But you can see some major artifacting here. Like this game is completely unplayable in its current state, and it's bad. So then you have this one, which is Astros, and you can see here the lines on the screen. This is just a picture, but you can see again the GPU artifacting here on Astros Playground. Then we also have here Destiny, which is again showing a whole bunch of different artifacting. It makes the cutscene, well, this is a cutscene in this example, makes it effectively unplayable. And again, this is not what your console is supposed to be doing. That is brand new. And then we have other examples here where it looks like lightning actually is flashing across the screen. But I can assure you that is the GPU having some issues. Now, the question is, what is actually causing all this? And you can see here, here's an NHL, I believe this is 2K21, which again, this is no way to be able to play a game on your console. This is just, it's ridiculous. That is not how you guys can see that. There's no reason to dive into that any further. So those are some pretty major issues. And if you're having that, the good news here is that it does look like Sony is replacing the consoles pretty quickly. I think every manufacturer knows they're going to have issues with the first allotment. It's just the way that it is. And Microsoft infamously had the red ring of death many years ago. I don't think that this is on that scale, but more transparency is we don't actually know why these consoles are doing it. Is this something that the GPU was just a bad yield, and that's just, luck of the draw? They were a bad chipset, and that's why they're doing that. Were they damaged in transit? Very plausible too. These things come a long way and they get bumped around, and maybe the heat sink has just gotten knocked off. Or is that there's just too much heat in there and they're being effectively fried or ruined because of the heat output of the console? We don't know the exact answer yet. But the interesting thing on the GPU side, while they are not the exact same GPU, Microsoft and Sony are using different GPUs, they are both from AMD. So theoretically, you could see some tangible, cross-pollination there, that if Sony is having GPU issues, in theory, it should partially impact what Microsoft is doing. Although that might be a little bit of a stretch at this time, so I wouldn't read too much into that. But I mean, you can just look at these videos here and see that this is a major failure of the GPU, and that it needs to be replaced. And that is exactly what Sony is doing for these unlucky customers. It's unfortunate that this does happen. This is just the nature of building hardware, especially consoles, which are very, very customized pieces of hardware. And there's not much, I mean, they do test these things before they come out. There's no doubt about it, but they're just more limited testing than, say, like a Windows 10 update or an Acer PC, where it's a more of a known quantity. And so unfortunately, Sony is going to be dealing with this one for a little bit. The question we really just need to understand now is, how widespread is this? Yes, it's very easy to go find these on Reddit and on Twitter and everywhere else. That's not the issue, because, hey, if you got this problem, you're going to go to the social media to try to get it resolved. That's just typically how these things work. Squeaky wheel gets the grease in this scenario. But what we don't know is how many squeaky wheels are representing the population. Is it 1 per 1,000? Is it 1 per 10,000? Is it 1 per million? I'd be surprised if it's 1 per million. That would be incredible for Sony on a sales volume, but we will find out. So that is the thing that I would be looking out for. Hopefully for Sony's sake, this is a very isolated issue, but we just don't quite know. Those are the biggest challenges. There have been some other things too. I've heard people having PS5s and their disk drive is clicking just like the Xbox. I was going to say Xbox One, Xbox Series X. Not that big of a deal. Again, this seems like small in comparison to the GPU issue, because the GPU is in all of their consoles, right? The disk drive is only in their highest end, and I suspect that many people bought the digital version, which, much like the Series S, doesn't mean you have to worry about that disk drive clicking, but the GPU is the same in Sony's both PlayStation 5 with the disk and without. So if it is a true GPU issue, means that all consoles could be impacted. So the question is, how could they resolve these issues? Well, if it's truly just a yield issue, just swap and replace. That's the best thing they can do, and then they just kind of work themselves out. The worst case scenario is that it truly is a heat issue, which means that they have to do one of two things. Either they have to update the design of the internals of the PlayStation 5, which means that they can then, produce the console graphics that they promised. The other one too is that they'd have to downclock the GPU to make it produce less heat or produce less artifacting in this scenario. The thing is, we don't truly know what the problem is yet. If it's just a yield and it was a bad sample pool, then that's the best case scenario for Sony right now. The worst case is that the console's design is just not, effectively dispersing the heat, and that these things are truly overheating. My gut says that if they were truly overheating, this would be a much wider spread issue at the moment. Right now, it does appear to be a little bit isolated, which is a good thing for Sony. And I would think that if it was truly an overheating issue, we'd see it on a much wider scale. And who knows? Only time will tell to see what truly happens with the PlayStation 5. But for now, those are the launch issues that you should be aware of.